The phone rings, and it's your doctor's voice telling you the 3 words you never want to hear. You have cancer. In 2009, over 700,000 women will hear those words and begin a journey that they never thought they would take. These are the stories from some of the women who took that journey.
I don't remember the exact date. I know that I found out sometime in February of this year. I had just started a new job, and so everything was kind of a blur. I didn't have health insurance, and so I hadn't gone for a physical exam in like 2 years. And my health insurance had just kicked in, and so I went ahead and went for just a physical, just a regular checkup. I just never, I had no idea that I had cancer, and I certainly didn't think I had cancer. I didn't go to the appointment, to check out if I had cancer. I just went for a regular exam.
I was originally diagnosed with ductal carcinoma in situ, which is stage 0 breast cancer. And then I was upgraded to stage 1 breast cancer. And it was my left breast, and I was diagnosed through a mammogram. I didn't have any lump. I didn't have any symptoms at all. It was a routine mammogram. I just started having them a year before.
I was diagnosed with breast cancer the first time on Valentine's Day, of all days, in 2001. I was in the shower and getting ready fast to go to work, and my hand accidentally bumped into my left breast, and I felt something that I had never felt before. The shape of a domino, and but that was on a Friday, and it wasn't until a Sunday night when I felt it again that I told my husband about it. And the next day I called my doctor, and he asked me to come in, and I had a mammogram 3 hours later and was in a surgeon's office the next day.
Isabel was diagnosed with colon cancer probably 8 months after going through several misdiagnosis of, she was struggling with stomach pains, and she kept going to her general practitioner, and sometimes they'd say, oh, you have ulcers, and they'd give her a pill for that, or you have acid reflux, they'd give her a pill for that. They just could never pinpoint it, and it came down to where she was so weak she couldn't even pull an 8-hour shift at work. And that was a red flag, and they sent her in to go get a blood transfusion because they realized her blood levels were so low. And from there it went into an ultrasound, and that's when they found the mass in her liver, which unfortunately by that time it was too late because it was metastatic stage 4.
Well, I was driving. I was driving, so I had to pull over and listen to the doctor. And the way he put it was, I was thankful. He said, you have a little problem here. And he explained the kind of malignancy that I had, and that it was caught very, very early. And he said, you're going to go someday, but you're not going to go from this. And so it started off just on a positive note. He had to deliver bad news, and I asked him a question after we had talked, and I'd finally settled down and understood the kind of cancer that I had. And I asked him, I said, Doctor, how do you make these phone calls? And he said, nobody's ever asked me that before. And he said, I have to make these calls several times a week, sometimes much worse news than I've delivered to you. And he says, but it's not an easy job to do. And I just told him, I said, God bless you for having to make these calls and delivering the message in the way you do.
I believe I was here by myself when I got the phone call. It was later in the afternoon, after everyone had gone home. And I actually carpooled to work, and that day I was carpooling. And I remember when I was first diagnosed, and I spoke to the radiologist, and I spoke to her a long time about it, and I asked her what she thought it might be. And she really couldn't give me a lot of information, but she gave me enough that suggested that there might be something there. I go every year for mammograms since I was 40 years old, and I'd never had any problems with it. And it had actually been less than a year since my previous mammogram, and I'd gone in on my own because I thought I had felt something that didn't feel proper. And then I got the call back, and I was expecting it to be clean like it always was, but this time it wasn't. So I remember going down the elevator, meeting my carpool ride, and she says, Charlene, how was your day today? And I said, oh, it was fine. And then I thought, no, it wasn't. I said, I just received some news that I'm not quite sure about. And so I didn't say anything, and she didn't push it. And then when we got to the car, she said, do you want to talk, Charlene? And I said, yeah. I said, I think I was just diagnosed with breast cancer. And we prayed. Both of us in the car, we prayed. And ever since then, I've just given it to God, and He's just helped me through this whole ordeal with my cancer.
I think my first thought was, this is going to be a huge inconvenience. I wasn't emotional, didn't cry. I just was irritated. I had a new job and had a lot going on in my life, and so I just felt like this is going to be a huge inconvenience. There's so much outreach for particularly breast cancer that it never occurred to me that this would be something that might take my life. It just never entered my mind. I just thought, well, okay, a lot of people get breast cancer and I'm going to be fine. So immediately I just went into a mode of, okay, what do I have to do? And the reality of it took some time to set in, but it did eventually set in.
After I was diagnosed, I was scheduled for lumpectomy pretty quickly, within 2 weeks. I had that initial surgery. Because I was early stage, I didn't have to have chemotherapy. I was scheduled for 6 weeks of radiation treatment following the surgery. And I also had to have a second surgery because they weren't sure they got the cancer completely, because the margins of where they removed the cancer were a little too close. So I had to have 2 surgeries in all to deal with the breast cancer, followed by the radiation. The radiation wasn't that bad. It was for 6 weeks, but I went in every morning before I went to work. It made me tired, but I think most breast cancer patients, I think you sort of try to make yourself believe that you're not sick, and you still just plow through your treatment and everything else. And I was really tired, but I was convinced that I was going to plow through it and go right to work and carry on my life as normal.
I had to undergo the first time chemotherapy for 7 months. I had severe reactions to that due to the drug adriamycin, commonly known as the Red Devil. I was violently ill. I would vomit for 8 straight days after receiving chemo. No amount of medicine the doctors gave me worked. I just had to tough it out, and it was hell on earth. Well, after I had my chemo, I went through 6 weeks of radiation. And I thought radiation was going to be so much easier than chemo, and it was for the most part, because there was no vomiting and nausea involved. However, the last 9 days of radiation, I burnt, and I burnt bad, where my flesh would bleed and sores would form. So it was a very, very traumatic experience for me.
You know, it's funny because when I was getting ready to start chemotherapy, I was down in LA, and my doctor was looking at my hair because my hair was probably about down to here, and it was pretty. And I would get a lot of compliments on my hair. And so the doctor's telling me that, you know, there's a good chance I'm going to die. And he's being very realistic. And it's not an emotional time at all, but he looks at my hair and he says, your hair. And I'm like still back at the fact that he told me that there's a good chance I could die from this. And like 3 different times, he's like, your hair. And so I remember thinking, so what? My hair will grow back, you know? But then when I lost my hair, I gained a better understanding of what he meant. Hair becomes so much a part of us, and it isn't the hair, it's that we have this picture in our mind's eye of what we look like. And when you lose your hair, you lose a piece of your identity. And so essentially, you kind of feel like you're naked. You know, you're walking around and you feel like there's just, no matter what you do makeup, you do clothes, you know, you can kind of hide this and that, but gosh, with your hair, you know, and wigs, you're always afraid, oh, is it going to come off, or, you know, does it look like a wig? And so it has been a big realization for me as to why there's such a big deal about the hair loss.
Initially, Isabel did have to have surgery. Part of the colon was removed, the infected part. About over 20 lymph nodes were removed. And after that, she started chemo, and she continued to do chemo till the end. She went through a series of medications, the drugs, pill form, or she had a port installed. And we went every 2 weeks to the cancer center where they'd give her chemo. Initially, Isabel was able to care for her children. She shared custody with the fathers, so it was a week on, week off. And we specifically had all her chemo treatments on the week she did not have her children, because she would be tired, she needed to sleep, she needed days to recuperate. And on her week off is when she had her children, therefore she could spend more time with them and be more attentive to them, even though they knew what was going on. And she wouldn't be as sick as the first initial days from her treatment. Towards the end, it was more difficult. Father stepped in a little bit more, the family stepped in a little bit more. She was bedridden more, she just didn't have the energy. She slept a lot. So the family at that point really put in an effort to help out.
My dad was really great through this whole experience. You know, I started chemo in April of this year, and with the exception of one of my chemo treatments, my dad was at every one. And it was very emotional, you know, having somebody that you care about that lives that far away, making that trip. He didn't make that trip that frequently, so this was something new for him to be coming that often. So every 3 weeks, basically, he was coming down and would spend an entire week with me, go to chemo with me, and then stay the duration of the week until the side effects of the chemo would ease up enough that he felt I was okay to be by myself.
What I learned from Isabel's struggle as a family member, I think you try and direct them on what's right and what's wrong, what they should be doing. I was doing a lot of research on the internet for her, on her medications and on cancer, and trying to figure out what caused this, how much longer, what could she do to eradicate it or just get more time. And so if I saw something, I felt like I wanted to be like the mother figure and steer her in that direction.
She had so many people who loved her. There's so many people who pitched in and did whatever they could to try to make her life a little bit easier, and in many different ways. So she had a wonderful support group of people around her.
In the end, I learned that it was her life and she needed to live it the way she wanted to live it. And the best thing as family is to just support her in her decisions. She was an adult, she had children, and I couldn't even imagine realizing that I knew my life was coming to an end. So if I wanted to go anywhere or do anything, I had that right to do that and not have anybody hold you back. So it was just unconditional support.
I think if I could offer advice to anyone who's dealing with breast cancer or family members of a person dealing with breast cancer or any kind of cancer, is to be supportive, to be there, to listen to them, to understand the emotional toll that it takes on people, because the emotional toll is probably equal to the physical toll it could take on a person. And just be supportive and understanding. And so if anything, it's taught me to continue taking care of myself the best that I can, and it's also taught me that life is short and that you have to really value the people in your life, the relationships you have, you know, every day that you wake up healthy.
I would advise any woman going through cancer to ask a lot of questions of her doctor, because they throw out so much information to us at the time of our diagnosis, and at the time the pathology comes back, we cannot retain it. We only digest a very, very small amount of information. But as we go on and as we read and as we study, we become our own advocate. And so never be afraid to ask any question to your doctor. Also, get a second opinion. The first time I went to a surgeon, I was told that my lump was nothing more than a hormonal change in my breast. Had I not gone for a second opinion, I wouldn't be alive today. So I cannot state how important a second opinion is.
I think if I could even just share with somebody that this too shall pass, and there will be a point when you'll get up in the morning and the first thing you think about won't be cancer, whether you still have it or not, you will get past that stage. And I think the other thing I would share with them is find whatever it is that inspires you and surround yourself with it. I don't care what it is, if it's music, if it's art, if it's your children, if it's your work, you know, whatever it is that makes you feel alive and gives you hope, you know, stick with that.
I remember when I was diagnosed, because Charlene, everybody knew that she had had breast cancer and gone through the surgery, and she was my source of information. One of the things that helped me most when I was making my decision about what kind of surgery I was going to have, I talked to women who had been through it before. And one of the questions was, if you had to do it over again, what would you do different? And women, including Charlene, were very forthright about, oh boy, had I known this, I wouldn't have done that. Or if I had known that, I would have done that. And that really helped me because of Charlene being so giving in information and candid about what she went through and what she would do different and why.
How does that make you feel, Charlene?
Well, I remember when Sheriff Mims first told me that she was diagnosed with cancer, and I told her, I said, well, you have a fellow friend here. I'll be here with you during the whole process.
And you have been.
And we have.
Oh, she has been. I'm so thankful for you.
Thank you.
You are able to see a common thread weaving its way through each woman's story.